Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inspiring Women Summit. This is Deva Haley Mitchell. I am the Summit founder and the host of these sessions, and I am really looking forward to this next conversation called Staying Spiritually Centered in a Fast-Moving World with Sadhvi Bhagawati Saraswati and Kiran Bali. Before we get started, I want to just mention a few things about these sessions. We really are loving the dialogues that you're all participating in with us on our Facebook group, so please do keep those going with us. You can go to www.facebook.com/Inspiring Women Summit to share your comments. If there's questions you have, feel free to ask those. You can network with each other. And please do also share these sessions and this summit with your friends and loved ones in your life. We really want this message and all the amazing content here to spread far and wide. So if you can help us out on that front, we would deeply appreciate it. Also just wanted to let you know that for those of you who are interested in owning a copy of these sessions, having the recordings and the transcripts, we do have that option available to you. You can go to inspiringwomensummit.com/upgrade, and you'll find the package with the recordings, transcripts, some wonderful bonuses are also available there. And we are making a portion of the proceeds available this year to an organization called Shared Hope, which is dedicated to the eradication of sexual slavery on our planet. And we really hope that you will support this organization as well through the upgrade package, but also just really finding out about their good work and supporting this really important cause in the world. All right, so with all that said, let me introduce today's speakers to you. We'll start with Sadhvi Bhagawati, who lives at the Parmarth Niketan Ashram on the banks of the Ganges River in Rishikesh, India. For those of you who have never been to India, you definitely want to put Rishikesh on your tour, and Sadhvi and Swamiji, the Swami that she represents there, have an incredible ashram that is such a open-hearted, amazing place to immerse in India, so I really want to encourage your visiting there. Sadhvi is also the president of the Divine Shakti Foundation, which is a charitable organization bringing education, vocational training, upliftment, and empowerment programs to both women and children in India. She was also the Secretary General of the Global Interfaith WASH Alliance, which is an international alliance of interfaith religious leaders working for water, sanitation, and hygiene. The list of Sadhvi's accomplishments and her deep humanitarian efforts goes on. And what I want to say, in addition to all those external accomplishments, as you'll find from hearing her voice, there's a level of depth and commitment to service. She is a tireless servant of the divine that is really so honorable, amazing, and really inspirational. So I welcome you, Sadhvi. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you so much, Deva. It's a wonderful, wonderful joy and honor to be here.
So we also have Kiran Bali. Kiran is a global interfaith leader, and she's chair of the world's largest grassroots interfaith organization, which operates in 94 countries and has also addressed the UN General Assembly on women's empowerment and community challenges. That organization, for those who are not familiar with it, is URI, the United Religions Initiative. And it's a really powerful organization that I've been familiar with for many years. Kiran is also a social entrepreneur whose skills have substantially improved lives through her ethic of selfless community service, transcending all boundaries of diversity. She was honored with an MBE at the age of 29 for exceptional voluntary community service, and she's one of a mere handful of young female global interfaith and community leaders. So with that, we want to give you a very warm welcome, Kiran, to be here with us at the Inspiring Women Summit.
Thank you so much, Deva, and to Sadhviji as well. It's a blessing to have this time to speak to you both.
So Sadhvi, since I know that the heart of your practice is meditation and being in spiritual practice itself, would you just open up with a brief 1 or 2 minute invocation or grounding so we can all be fully present to receive this session today?
Beautiful. Sure, Deva, I would be honored and joyful to do that. Let's all just take a moment and wherever you are, if you can safely close your eyes for a moment, do so. And bring the awareness from the world around you onto the inner world. Allow the senses, the perception, the focus to shift from the world outside to the world inside. And bring the awareness onto the breath. Don't try to change it. Don't manipulate it. Don't count it or do anything with it. Just allow your consciousness to merge with that breath. As it flows in and flows out. And notice as you do so, the way the borders and the boundaries of the self seem to dissolve. What we thought was solid selfness, solid I. As our awareness merges with the breath that flows in and flows out, we realize that who we are is merging and one with the world around us. Those borders and boundaries melt and dissolve as carried by our breath. We unite with all of that around us. Take just a moment to be in that state of awareness, that state of consciousness. Allow yourself to breathe into expansion. And as you gently open your eyes and come back to the moment wherever you are, realize that the truth of that awareness, the truth of that expansiveness, the truth of that dissolved border and boundary between the self and the world around you, that truth is still there. We are one with everything around us.
Blessed be. Thank you, Sadhvi, for that beautiful opening. And this session is titled Staying Spiritually Centered in a Fast-Moving World. So I know for myself, one of the ways to do that is to take just a few minutes when I'm not feeling centered and to do just what Sadhvi did, lead us into a place where we can slow down, where we can take a few breaths, and we can call ourselves back into that place. So thank you for modeling that, Sadhvi.
Of course.
And I want to just open this up to you, Kiran, and invite you to share some of your wisdom and what works for you from your perspective and how you do that and how you recommend others do that. How do we find this place of center when life, for many of us, can feel like it's moving at a very fast pace? And at times there can be, for some people, a feeling of overwhelm, of trying to manage so many details. So how do we stay centered in the midst of all the demands placed on us in today's world?
Thank you, Deva, and thank you so much, Sadhviji, for leading us through the meditation. When I introspected many years back around my own spirituality, I did have this feeling that it was simply about meditating and helping me connect to my true nature. However, I did struggle quite a bit just being able to sit down and focus was something that I just wasn't good at. And that allowed me to explore further around what is spirituality and how does my religion, which is my shape, which is what shapes me as a person and which guides me on a daily basis, how is that going to link in with my spirituality? And so I've learned more about this. For me, the word spirituality is a very broad concept. And within that, there is a number of dimensions. And for me, it just includes something of a sense of connection to something bigger than ourselves. From a Hindu perspective, I'm taught that my goal is spiritual and self-realization or God-realization. And my struggle was, well, how do I do that? Do I have to sit quietly and meditate in a corner and be able to connect with my inner God that way? I really struggled because, like you mentioned, we live in a fast-moving world. And there is so much to do at home, in the workplace, in this life that I've chosen at the moment, that there's very little time to be able to sit quietly and meditate. But then for me, spirituality is about being a good person, and it's also about dedicating all of my thoughts, my deeds and my actions to benefit other people, but also myself. And I found that just through actions, I've been able to focus on positive energy within me, but also see that divinity within other people. And that's what helps me in this really fast material world to really find that peace and that contentness in some form. And when I do see other people, I see myself being spiritual, which is exactly who I am, but recognizing that there is also spirituality in every being. And I think that there's been a misconception in my mind that being spiritual and doing jobs and work in the material world didn't go hand in hand, and that there was a contradiction between that. But I think that in my mind that was wrong. When I looked further into my religion, I came across readings in the Bhagavad Gita and Lord Krishna talking about Kriya Yoga and Karma Yoga, and the option that I chose was the karma, so the actions. And I think that's been important for me, that I felt I didn't have to renounce or do anything that would affect any of my family members to realize my spiritual self or do the right thing. And I know, Sadhviji, obviously, utmost respect for how you live in such simple terms, and I admire you so much. And I've always thought, well, why can't I do that? And I think it's because in some ways my path has been set out for me in this world, and I have responsibilities, and for that reason I feel I cannot shun those, but I can still try my best to try and realize my spirituality, realize the divinity in others in a different path. And I think Hinduism really gives me that freedom to do that.
It's so beautiful, Kiran, and what you mentioned about seeing the divine in all is really, I agree fully. This is the key. You know, the word spirituality, if we look at just the word, aside from the beautiful definition that you've given, the word itself literally just means pertaining to the spirit, of the spirit. And so spirituality is living in a way that realizes that we're all connected. And that was the focus and the point of that brief meditation in the beginning was, can we experience, even in just a moment or two, the awareness that we're not separate? The world that we live in tries to convince us over and over again that we are separate from each other and we're material and that we are not connected. And yet, the question of spirituality really is, can we see the spirit in matter rather than being this distinction between the spiritual world and the material world? Can we see the spirit in that? And as Kiran, you were saying about seeing the divine in all, well, that's the point of it all. I mean, in the Upanishads, we're told, Isha vasyamidam sarvam, yat kincha jagatyam jagat. And it literally means everything in the universe is pervaded by the divine. There is nothing which is not pervaded by the divine. And so I think one of the greatest ways to do this is just by whatever your duty is, whatever your work is, can you see the divine wherever you go, with whomever you're interacting? So it's not a matter of this is my 30 minutes or 1 hour or 90 minutes of spiritual time, and then there's the rest of my day of my material world. And in spirituality, I'm connected, but in the material world, it's me versus you. But rather, in my spirituality, whatever my religion, every faith tells us the divine is in all. And so if we carry that message out of our meditation, out of our temples, out of our churches and our synagogues, into the world, and realize that whomever we are interacting with or doing business with or even just speaking to, in that person is the same divine we worship in our temples or churches or synagogues, and the same divine with whom we are connecting in our meditation or in our yoga, then everything we do and everywhere we go becomes our spiritual practice. And then, of course, it keeps us centered because our focus stays on seeing the divine and responding to the divine and being in prayer with the divine, rather than, oh, how can I push you away in order to get ahead, or how can I step on your head to get the one raise or the one promotion?
There's a bit of a...
Sorry.
Go ahead, Kiran. Go ahead.
I think it can also, it's absolutely right, but it also can be quite challenging as well, because how do you, in your own self, in your consciousness, raise that awareness within the various aspects of your life? And whilst we recognize that the spiritual consciousness is our essence and it's really existing in our deepest core, is it easy to see that divinity in others? And for example, if you are liaising or working with people who are very, very negative, do you always see clearly that spiritualness in them, or the fact that the person is potentially divine but may not have made that conscious contact with that? And I think for me that can be a little bit challenging, because you have to choose how to look at people and situations, and do you do that superficially or do you do that deeply? And it's right to do that deeper, but I think that can come with some, over time, I think I've learned to try and do that. I wouldn't say I was an expert, but I thought to myself, if I can discover the essence within me, that would help me to see the deeper essence in others.
Absolutely. And that's why when people say, well, what's the point of meditation, and how do we bring our meditation into the world? You've just clarified it exactly. Through my meditation, I have the experience within myself. And then the minute I've had it within me, the minute I've realized that I am one with the divine, with the world around me, then that which I've experienced in myself, I start to be able to recognize it in others. But absolutely, until and unless we've had the experience within ourselves, it's impossible, I think, to see it in others. And that's why the internal process and the external process really go so hand in hand, and I don't think you can do one without the other, and yet the internal process itself leads to an automatic and dynamic change in how we interact with the world. Because once we've realized the nature of who we are, the fact that we are whole and complete and divine, we stop looking to the people around us to fill up our holes. And since I'm stopping looking to people around me for that, there's no longer that attachment or agenda to how people are going to respond or what they're going to do, which enables me then to see them much more clearly and much more as the divine. But you're right, it's really difficult. This is not something easy. And, it's like, can you stay warm in a room where the air conditioning is on? Well, of course you can. You can if your yoga is really good, if your pranayama is really good. There are, monks who dry towels in the snow. Yeah. But it's certainly a lot harder to stay warm in a room where the AC is on than to stay warm in a room where the AC is not on. And that's why I think going back, whether it's just every day in your own temple, whether it's periodically to spiritually charging places, whether it's going on pilgrimage, is so important, because it really charges us back up with that ability to, spiritually stay grounded, stay connected, stay focused in a world that is trying to pull our focus and our attention from the inside to the outside.
As you speak about sorry, I was just saying that Bhagawati, what I was hearing you say is that the inside, outside, the practice work, it's all the same, and yet I know from my experience and from the experience of the students that I work with at Well that it can be quite a lot easier. For example, for me, when I go visit you in India and I'm spending, hours meditating there, or I'm on some sort of retreat, it's much easier to stay in this grounded, open, centered place where I can see the divinity in all things and it's all in a state of flow. And I feel like part of the challenge for us as modern day mystics of different flavors is to have those times and spaces where we can charge up, as you were just saying, Sadhvi. But it's the real test is, how do we maintain that when suddenly, we're in a situation where there's not the level of calm as in an ashram or in a retreat center, and suddenly there's, so many different details that need to be handled or many different demands placed upon us. And so I feel like this is part of the question for all of us is, when you're not in those moments, when you're off of your cushion, when you're really in the world, and especially when the world throws you what feels like a curveball, something that really challenges you, or something that activates the very human part of you where you might feel hurt on some level, or you might feel perhaps even angry on some level. Those are the places where I think it's really important to have tools to be able to come back to center, where you don't need to wait for your next retreat or even wait till the next morning when you do your spiritual practice, but how can we, within a few breaths or if necessary within a few minutes, come back to that center point. And I'm wondering if either one of you have any practices or things that you might recommend to people who are leading full lives, so that the process of coming back to the truth of who we are can be a much more automatic process. And I know eventually it becomes that you don't leave that place is the goal. But for many of us, there's a journey to getting into that state where we never wobble from that centered place.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think that the breath for me is probably the easiest, the simplest, and the quickest way of coming back, because what you've said is exactly right. Of course it's easier to do it in an ashram. Of course it's easier to do it in a retreat center. And the inside process and the outside process are not the same. I apologize if that was not clear. What I meant was that the inside process leads us to the outer expression, the outer experience. That it's very, very difficult, and I think probably impossible, to work on the outside first, because until and unless you have the inner experience, the inner change, the inner awareness, you really can't change how you're acting in the world. Otherwise it becomes just behavior modification. But as we enter a deeper state in our personal practice, how we live in the world shifts. And of course, we all have triggers, we have difficult situations. As you said, the world throws us, a curveball. And for me, what I have found and what I suggest to people from all over the world, and in almost every circumstance I think it really works, is just to go deeply into the breath. Because what that does, imagine for a moment that you're standing on the edge of the ocean and you're knee deep in the ocean and it's all seeming very nice. And you start going out a little bit, and then this huge wave comes at you. Well, those of us who have ever been in the ocean know that you can't actually outrun a wave, regardless of how tempting it may look at the time. And so many of our initial instincts is, I'll just turn around and I'll run back to shore and I'll get there before this wave crashes on me. But of course it never works. The wave is much faster than we are. And if you try to outrun it, what you find yourself is face down with a mouthful of sand. And the way to do it is you actually turn around, face the wave, and dive into it. And the only way to handle that wave without it thrashing you around, without it tossing you onto the sand, is not to turn your back on it, but to look straight at it and then dive as deep as you can possibly go. And then what you discover is it's gone one way, you've gone the other way. And similarly in life, I think that the deeper we can go in every moment, and for me, the easiest way of going deep is the breath. If we can just close our eyes, or even if we can't close our eyes, bring the awareness deeply into the breath. What it does is, like in the ocean, carries us into a depth where there are no waves. The waves are only on the surface. The storm is only on the surface. And so the deeper we can go, I think the more stable we're going to be. And lastly about that, the beautiful piece of that, is that in the ocean itself, in the depths is actually where the most beautiful life is. If you go to any of these aquariums where they've got these phenomenally gorgeous, colorful fish and, underwater life, the deeper you go in the ocean, the more colorful it is, the more full of life it is. And so the deeper we can live our lives, A, the more stable it will be, and B, I think we find that the more alive it is.
Mm-hmm. And I think, Sadhviji and Deva, that my soul is a little bit different in that I find things like chanting, mantras, praying, a lot of music helps me to focus, but helps my body, mind and spirit become that one whole presence. And I think in a busy life, there are a number of things that I do that I think are spiritually based. So, for example, the diet that I adopt. So, eating a good, healthy diet, but not, killing any particular animal or living being for that, other than what we are allowed, which is the plant-based food in Hinduism. But I also think that the introspection is important for me. So, being watchful of my emotions and my thoughts, trying to be somewhat detached from them, but then realizing that that introspection becomes automatic. I might not be consciously doing it all the time. And I think honesty and being happy. So if I'm happy, I can radiate that happiness to others. So trying to, be smiling and trying to make other people feel better, I think that's important for me. And these are little things that I think in today's fast world, working world, that I can really do at every step. And then just performing my actions, I think, about without expectation of what's in it for me. So, in the professional life, we do have goals and we do need to finish things, but it's about how this can make things better for everyone and this wider community, the wider world and the whole of creation. How can we put that in? And so some of the things that I could do is work within the environment, help preserve the environment, show compassion to living beings and animals. And I just think that the whole spiritual awareness then is not in conflict with the world that we see, but it allows me to perceive more deeply into the essence of everything and see that spiritual center within everything. And I think it's a process. I haven't completely mastered that. I'm learning every day, and I believe my soul is here on a journey to learn. And when it's learned what it needs to, then it will make its own decision about where to go next.
I know for you, Sadhvi, that the service is also a very big part of what you just said, Kiran, and I know for you, Bhagawati or Sadhvi, it's also central to your path. So maybe you could share a little bit more about the service component and how that can play into and is in such a central part of the spiritual path, or one of the choices we can make. It's not just about doing the practices, but as you were saying, Kiran, really allowing the actions we take to be of greater benefit. And there's a whole path of the yogic tradition which is specifically dedicated to that.
Sure, of course. I wanted also, just before going into the topic of service, just to very quickly respond for just a quick moment as well to what Kiran had said about staying joyful in moments of difficulty. Because while I know her personally and I know how beautifully she's able to do that, I just, for all the people who are listening, wanted to also mention that I think it's really important for us at times when we're not able to stay joyful, when the curveballs have been things that actually really distress us and that we're not able to find that place of joy, not to berate ourselves and to really be able to embrace and accept in that moment whatever we're feeling, whether it's tension, whether it's stress, whether it's despair, whether it's frustration, whether it's anger, because the more we push away the stress that we feel, or the anger we feel, or the jealousy we feel, or the frustration we feel, the larger it looms. And in terms of being able to stay spiritually centered, what I have found is that to just be able to, in that moment, look at whatever is there, open your arms and embrace it as you would if someone else came to you and said, God, I'm really feeling angry, I'm really feeling upset. The same way that you would embrace them with compassion and love, to be able to embrace ourselves as well. Then in terms of the concept of service, the service is, for me, such an integral and inherent part of the spiritual practice. What I have found, and this is really what Pujya Swamiji's teachings are, is that the meditation is something that gets us in touch with our oneness with the world. As we meditate, we realize that the borders and the boundaries of who I thought I was dissolve. And we become literally, first one with the cushion we're sitting on, then one with the room we're in, the air, and then slowly, an experience of connection to the world, whether it lasts a moment, a minute, an hour, regardless of how long we're able to hold on to that. Once we have that experience, out of that experience, service flows naturally. It's not about being a martyr. It's not about getting a gold star in humanitarianism or patting yourself on the back for how selfless you are. It's not that. It's a matter of the fact that, for example, if I injure my right leg, I'm going to limp. And what limping is that my left leg is taking up extra weight because my right leg is injured. But I didn't have to fold my hands and say, oh, great humanitarian left leg, you are so wonderful. Would you mind taking up a little bit of extra weight? It does it automatically because it understands that the right leg is self. And that's the goal of the spiritual practice leading us into service, is can I serve not as me serving you, but can I serve as the left leg serves the right leg? Automatically, with no question, with no sense of separateness, and because we're self, and the hunger of others is our hunger, and their thirst is our thirst, and their pain is our pain. And in my meditation, can I experience, along with the light, along with the joy, along with the bliss, can I experience the hunger in the stomachs of my brothers and sisters and myself across the world? Can I experience the tree being felled, the river drying up, women dying in childbirth, farmers committing suicide due to desiccated fields? Because that's also part of the experience. It's also part of the oneness. And if we can bring that into our meditative awareness, then the service becomes just the most natural byproduct of the meditation.
Absolutely. And I think for me, I alluded to karma yoga at the beginning, and for me that's, how one conducts oneself through their actions, their thinking, and how we really act in accordance with our duty, rather than looking at our self-centered desires. And I think that can be really hard in this world, one needs a house, sometimes we have a car. How do you actually draw a line on those materialistic things that you may require, but then not get too attached to them? And so for me, Lord Krishna, from his teachings, mentioned that, any work done without selfish expectations, helps to purify the mind, but it helps us to do the reason or see the reason. And I think once we see that in others, we're able to relate that. And also in many religions, there's this concept of you shall reap what you sow. And I think this comes back to the concept of karma, in that if you do good to others, that will come back in some way. And we want to spread goodness around the world to every living being, and which is why we have to take the lead in whichever way we can to ensure that we spread that positivity and ensure that divine spark in every living being is actually enlightened, awakened, and used to its best ability, because this life is a journey. It's an ongoing journey from the Hindu perspective, but it's just an opportunity as well to enlighten ourselves, and I believe we can do that through serving others, serving our parents, serving the community, and indeed Mother Nature and all living beings as well.
Beautiful. Wow. Well, this is so powerful. I love hearing both of you, and I love hearing all the ways that we can be doing karma yoga. We are coming to the end of our session time, and so I wanted to invite each of you to share a little bit more about how people can learn about the organizations that you're representing and the various offerings you have available. So Sadhvi, do you want to tell us a little bit about where you're coming from and how people can reach you?
Sure. As you mentioned so beautifully in the introduction, I live in Rishikesh, India, on the banks of the Ganga at Parmarth Niketan Ashram. That website is Parmarth, PARMARTH.org. And from that website, you can also download lots of publications, sounds of Vedic chanting. There's so much there. I'm also the president, as you mentioned, of the Divine Shakti Foundation, which is just divineshaktifoundation.org, and all one word, divineshaktifoundation.org. And that's our foundation of educational programs and women's empowerment and upliftment programs and medical care programs. And then the Global Interfaith WASH Alliance. That website is www.washalliance.org. And just for people who don't know, WASH stands for Water and Sanitation and Hygiene. And that's an alliance of which Kiran is actually on our board as well, of international interfaith leaders working to bring water, sanitation, and hygiene to people all over the world, because actually more people die every year from water-related illnesses and ailments than all other forms of violence combined. So whether it's wars, whether it's religious violence, whether it's drug-induced violence, all of those violence combined, fewer people perish each year than those who perish simply due to water-related issues. So that's washalliance.org.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for all the organizations that you represent. And there are a lot of resources available on those different sites, so please do check them out. And Kiran, do you want to tell people a little bit more about URI?
Yes, thank you. So to build on what you mentioned before, URI, the world's largest interfaith grassroots network, we're currently operating in over 90 countries, and we have this special design called cooperation circles, of which we have over 700 now around the world. What we're actually promoting is enduring daily interfaith cooperation, and to create cultures of peace, justice and healing for the earth and all living beings. And how we do this is we really celebrate the rich diversity that we have in our world, all the spiritual expressions, the indigenous traditions, and all the beautiful religions that we have. We want to bring those together, to work together, to engage with people, to bridge all the religious and cultural differences and work together for the good of their community and indeed the good of the world. So we have a number of cooperation circles which are people of diverse backgrounds working together for the environment, for women's empowerment, compassion towards animals, conflict resolution, human rights. And I think it's such an important structure because the power is in the grassroots. And we want to serve our cooperation circles and help them to do what it is they're doing to make that difference in the world. And we're very proud that the WASH Alliance is also a cooperation circle. And this opportunity for us to learn from Sadhviji and Swamiji and Parmarth Niketan is so important because this is how, we can build on the knowledge and the abundance of meditation and the spirituality that other people have, and how we can really bring that into us to strengthen our work and share that with others as well.
Thank you. So for those of you just who are interested in United Religions Initiative, you can go to uri.org, find out more about the different programs they have available all over the world. And I just want to thank both of you for, first of all, who you both are as people who are really dedicated to this deep karma yoga that we spoke of. I know you are both in high levels of spiritual service, and I really honor that. It's deeply, deeply important to me that there are models of inspiring women like both of you who are really putting your heart and your time and your intelligence and your sweat and your love into those grassroots projects on the ground in the way that both of you are. So thank you for who you are, and also thank you for the wisdom that you shared on this topic here today about how we can stay centered in the midst of it all. I know it was deeply beneficial for me, and I'm sure it was for our participants as well.
Thank you for your beautiful conversation as well.
And thanks, Kiran.
Thank you so much, Sadhviji. It's so good to have these conversations and just learn from one another. As you could guess, I'm more boisterous and, and more, out my soul just wants to go out and do things, and that's why I find that easier for me in terms of, awakening and realizing my own spirituality.
You're wonderful.
Beautiful. Well, thank you both.